So I'm Mike Daugherty. I'm the author of this book, The Devil Inside the Beltway. And this is a book written by, like a novel, 9 years ago, believe it or not, about what it's like to go through a government investigation for cybersecurity breach. And it's been a fascinating run. Is there anyone here that's been in past CornCons and listened to this presentation before? Good, thank you. Because I don't want to spend time rehashing the same thing and just doing a rerun, because a lot of things have happened. And the bigger picture is the whole modus operandi of corruption when it involves the government. So one of the things I've learned about this is, does anyone know about the Madoff book, No One Would Listen? So there was a guy that knew all about Madoff and everything he was doing. And he lived in Massachusetts, and he went to the SEC 5 times to try to get their attention on what was going on with Madoff and how he was leaving people's money vulnerable into the billions of dollars. And every time the SEC wouldn't listen. And every time he went more in depth and more in depth. And that truly resonates with me, because what I didn't expect when I wrote the book was that there would be so many people in America that just didn't want to listen, who just didn't care or had to spin it with their own political agenda. And to me, crime shouldn't be political, but evidently everything's political. So I was naive. And so the quick overview of what happened to me, well, let me just say one thing. So the reason I'm up here, to be clear, is to not grind an axe about woe is me, what happened to me. I'm way too busy for that. I'm here, I've always tried to be like a clarion call to explain as authentically as possible what really goes on in a government investigation, because there's such a vast difference between what we're taught our rights are in civics class or on television, which is where most of us get our information, versus the reality of what happens when you go through it yourself. And what's different between now and 2013 is I think everyone has a bit of a better awareness of this. I mean, people in the public now go, yeah, something's wrong. So that's a step in the right direction. So as an overview, what happened to me, I'm a healthcare entrepreneur, went to Michigan, kind of lived the American dream, raised by Detroit police officers, lived in Detroit, didn't want to be in automotive, didn't want to be in police work, went to healthcare as a surgical device rep, made a lot of money, worked in the operating room and surgery for 20 years, and then opened my own laboratory called LabMD, which is nothing more than changing what we did for my clients. Instead of working them with surgery, I built a company that diagnosed the tissue they took from their patients for cancer. And it had a technological spin. The reason we were different from Quest and LabCorp and all the mega labs is we were very niche in who was the expert, and we had the top guys reading things. Medicine has turned into a quantity price product versus what we were, which is quality. Okay, so we're driving down the road, life is good, 2008 rolls around, we're private, we're debt-free, we're profitable, we're growing, things couldn't be better, which is when God drops a tree on you, and one day the phone rings, and it's a guy named Robert Bobick who says, I'm the CEO of this company called Tyversa, and we do remediation, and sir, we found one file of 9,000 of your patients out in cyberspace. Now, 2008 is not 2022. So at the time, it's hard to go back, but literally, the word breach was not in the public lexicon. So that also meant that 9,000 patients in a file out in cyberspace, oh my God, everyone's freaking out. Unlike now, where we're 90 million people, whatever. So, we're so desensitized now. Back then, we were hypersensitive. And so here we have a private company that takes tissue that's referred to us by surgeons And all we know is surgeons are not going to send tissue to a place that has any inherent risk. So doubt kills. Doubt is enough to kill the business. So we scammer around. He tells us it probably was a peer-to-peer network. We find LimeWire on a workstation that to this day we think came installed from Dell refurbished. We don't know, but we didn't install it. And we had an office manager using it without authorization. I don't know how much you want to go. You have no internet access, don't use it, and they still do. This is a company that had 50 employees and 5 of us had an email. So we didn't, while we had servers and we had 4 tech people, we were as secure as everybody else and never perfect. But all we wanted to know when we got a call about this is, what are the facts of what happened? And he wouldn't tell us that unless we paid him $40,000. So we remediated on our own. We got rid of the workstation. We got rid of the employee. We spent a year and a half looking through peer-to-peer networks all over, all the networks, could never find the file anywhere, never had a victim, never had a problem. Thought, okay, it's going to go away. We have to focus on the change of this company because the whole medical landscape was changing with Obamacare. And then just as we start doing that, the Federal Trade Commission calls in 2010 and starts an investigation. And what I'm about to tell you is what is the narrative of what we were told was happening. And I'm going to try to go through this really fast. And then I'm going to tell you what we later found out really happened. And that's what's relevant, I think, to understanding the lack of accountability and who we're empowering to run our cybersecurity matrix today. So we, of course, are totally concerned about, do we have any victims? We're truly freaking out. And then, as it quiets down, the FTC calls and says they're going to start a non-public investigation. And we learned very quickly that government lawyers don't say a single word without planned intent. So non-public investigations, all relevant. And that actually got us in a bit of a crosshair with our insurance coverage for this. There's all sorts of things that happen. And so we think, because we dealt with Health and Human Services and we loved them and we got along great with them because we're like Boy Scouts, so we thought, okay, the FTC, no problem, just give them everything. And we gave them everything. We gave them 5,000 pages, and they were angry that we didn't organize it or Bates label it. And then we got flown to DC, and we were stunned. We were so naive and so stupid. We just were sitting there and going, golly gee, these people think we're felons. We're in trouble here. And they looked at us like we were felons. It was stunning. And what was more stunning was they wouldn't tell us what the rule is we broke. They wouldn't tell us what we did wrong. They wouldn't tell us what they were looking for, and they wouldn't tell us what we had to do right. And I learned, and this is the big thing about anyone involved in regulatory, is that the Federal Trade Commission argues that they get to make up the rule as they go along, that everything's case by case, and they get to rule make as they adjudicate, which means rule make as they fight you in court for already being guilty of something. So basically, you're arrested, and we're not going to tell you what you did wrong, and we're going to figure that out after. And because it's a civil issue, not a criminal issue, you don't have the rights that we're taught we have. The Bill of Rights is about criminal situations. There is no civil rights within a government situation, and I'm learning this as I go along. So I'm realizing these people are psycho. They have no interest in due process. They are not telling us what we did wrong or right. We're going to have to find that out on our own, and my company's going to die. Because what they don't understand is that the referring physician is the whole business to us. A surgeon is not going to send their tissue to us and we are one of the top uropathology labs in the United States, with the 2 top doctors in the country, reading tissue. And that just didn't matter to them. They were not going to let us know what was going on. And the doubt from having this type of vulnerability would kill the company. And I knew they didn't know that, and I knew they didn't care. So the game I had to play was go along and to get along. And for 3 years, we played go along to get along. And we gave them everything we wanted, and we answered. They kept bringing us back. And the bottom line is, I knew that I was dead either way. I thought these people are zealots. My money is that they're going to sue us no matter what, that we are small, we are defenseless, so they're going to make an example of us. And the game here in regulatory is Congress is not defining cybersecurity or what to do properly. Therefore, we, the regulator, have to do it. We can't make law, so we're going to make examples. So we're going to take this little victim here, and we're going to list what they did wrong. And the whole purpose of it isn't even if it's true. The purpose is to communicate to you, the community of corporations and hospitals, what you shouldn't do. And for the better of society, too bad for this poor little victim medical laboratory. That's exactly what I thought was going on. And I was right, but that's beside the point. So we rolled over and played nice. And in 2013, they sued us anyway. Well, by this time, I had gotten pro bono defense. I learned there's a lot of people in D.C. that know that they can steamroll you, and so I had people that wanted to defend me for free to take this on, because if I agreed to their accusations and signed their agreements, everyone in my industry would think I was guilty and I was dead. If I didn't sign it and I went to a fight, everyone in my industry would think I was guilty, so I'd think I was dead. So unlike TJ Maxx or whatever other company got involved with the Federal Trade Commission, in medicine, the doubt killed. I knew that we were dead either way, and it was basically a choice of what style of execution I wanted, and I knew they didn't know that. So I thought, well, I'm going to die in vain here. I have to fight this, because I can't go through the rest of my life with everyone going, well, you did something wrong, and you can't get over it, you idiot. Because that's what people think. You did something wrong, your ego's so huge, you can't admit it. Fair enough, because everyone thought, I got emails from I got this email from a CISO at University of Florida who said, and I'll never forget this, and this is pretty much an honest email that I thought most people were thinking, which was, you seem like a great guy, but you won't admit that you did something wrong and you had a hand in this. Because even though something terrible happened in your company, had you not been vulnerable in your lousy practices, it wouldn't have happened to you. So please just fess up you did something wrong. And I'm like, fair enough. Your lazy accusation is based on what proof? Out there in LinkedIn Neverland. But we can't say that. But it was honestly what I thought a very brutally honest statement of what other people were thinking but wouldn't say. And so I wrote a book called The Devil Inside the Beltway. And at that point, the book was a point about, and I guess the book went away, but oh well, doesn't matter. The book is at that time was just a really written like a novel to say, this is what it's like to go through a government investigation. So you all know in the real world, because that doesn't exist. I went out, you can't find that. So I had to live it and document it. But then what happened after I wrote that book was insane, because the FTC sued me, and I wrote the book, and 5 days later, Tyversa, the company that ripped me off, sued me for defamation. Then I had pro bono defense. Then we start getting some media. The company was destroyed from within because key people were leaving because something's wrong here. Mike is in trouble with the government. This ship's going down. I'm out. And so they leave, and how do you get new people to come on? So we closed in January of 14. And then the word got out that we closed to the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. And in April of 14, a whistleblower called, and this is how things get really nuts, and said, I took your file. I'm the one that broke in. I worked with Tyversa. Everything you say is true. It was not floating out in cyberspace. And I tried to kill myself twice after I found out what I did to destroy your company. So to make things more surreal, House Oversight got involved, Darrell Issa got involved, because this company was bureaucrated up with General Wesley Clark and Howard Schmidt and had access to the top echelons of government and was trying to get the whole government infrastructure to tell the business community that you must have peer-to-peer protection software bought from guess who, so that everyone would be better off. And when the whistleblower came out telling me it was all a ruse, that was a much bigger threat than just about me. Now these people are potentially going to be exposed for the bamboozling of the government. So this gets crazy. And so what happened after that point is we actually had a trial. I was on trial in an FTC court. The whistleblower came in. He pled the fifth. Everybody freaked out. It's like a movie. And the judge stays everything while he tries to get criminal immunity. You can't believe how slow things work in Washington. It took him a year to get criminal immunity, so a year goes by. In the meantime, he is being harassed. He's being chased down the interstate. He's got cameras on his property. His children are being pulled out of school. His house is being knocked down at 2 in the morning. He's got threatening letters in his barn and his refrigerator. There's people watching his children at the bus stop. I mean, crazy town stuff. And Congress does nothing. So there's a huge silencing power. And when you're in day-to-day life and you say to your friends, oh, I can't talk, I have to go to DC and I'm working with House Oversight, people think you're nuts. So you just pull in and just withdraw. And then the company's gone. And so you just muddle through those next couple years of finally getting a win. Because when the whistleblower came out and told the trial court that this was a ruse, that he took it himself, that it was not out in cyberspace, the FTC did not say, we're sorry, we made a mistake, case dismissed. The FTC rolled back and said, well, the FTC Act is from 1914, and it's about deception and fairness. And to be unfair in cybersecurity does not require a victim, does not require a breach, does not require anything like that. It just requires having a vulnerability. Well, at that moment, the legal community in cybersecurity and the Fortune 500 community realized, if Daugherty loses, we're stuck with, you've broken the law, even if you don't have a breach and you don't have a victim. So suddenly, it wasn't some sort of generous thing to come pay attention to me. It was like, wait a minute, we're going to be up a creek big time here. So I had a top firm, and let me just leap forward. At the end of that, we're in the FTC court, and in the FTC courtroom, they have their own judge. They make their own rules. And if the judge rules against the FTC, the commissioners get to go, doesn't matter, we're overturning anyway. And that's what happened in the FTC 99% of the time of the last 30 years, is the few times they lose, they overturn. So going to FTC court is usually a 3-year experience of money and bad press and exhaustion to just wear you down. Because if you win, they're going to overturn. And that's what they did. So the moment they overturned, then Ropes and Gray, which now the team's at Oric, but Ropes and Gray is a very, very well-known, very expensive, very good cybersecurity boutique firm that is known for not just rolling over and kissing the government's ass. And they took my case and we went and fought. And long story short, notice we're 2008, 2010, 2013, 2016 at the appellate court. In 2018, I quote-unquote win. And the 11th Circuit says, the FTC has no authority to do this without rules, without communication. And so I quote unquote win, but there's no win. I mean, it's like saying, we're so sorry, burned your house down, ruined everything, have a nice day. There's no sorry. You're just, the media is calling me going, you won. And I'm like, what did I win? What did I win? Nothing comes back. Everything's gone. Everything's destroyed. What do I win? This is important to, like, how does that matter to you guys, right? Like, why should you care other than it's some sort of heartbreaking story, right? What's coming around is that the government has got a big picture attack playbook that is very old. And it's called the long slog up Justice Mountain and persecution through process. And it's that, look, it's not like the movies, okay? You're not going to get to court in a week. And you're going to get accused. And when the public finds someone accused, there's doubt. Doubt is enough for everyone just to back away from you, just in case you're guilty, because I don't want to get involved. So the damages are prominent with the accusation to kill a company, and then the company doesn't come back. That is a huge tool and a very powerful weapon for defense law firms to tell anyone that's under government investigation, settle. Settle, settle, settle. Forget what you're taught about on television. Forget what you learned out in civics class. You're gonna be damaged severely no matter what. And that's the biggest thing I want people to understand, is that isn't going to change unless we make it change. And it doesn't really happen. People don't really get it till it happens to them. Well, now in the industry, we have it happening to you. And that is with the face of Joe Sullivan. Because what's going on is that Joe Sullivan is being used as a head on a spike. And it's basically what I call 16th century justice, where it's like, we are the powerful people, we want to keep the masses in control. Yes? Oh, thank you very much. I'm so sorry. Joe Sullivan is the former CISO of Uber. And Joe is right now on trial for criminal felony charges on not cooperating with the Federal Trade Commission during a breach where they replied by paying off the ransom. So does anyone else not know do you even know who Joe Sullivan is? Do we understand enough? Anyone have questions about that? Okay, anyone got any questions about Joe? Okay, the point is we're taking someone, we're putting their head up on the spike, and we're pointing to them to scare the crowd. That's why in the 16th century, when they cut off their head, why did they put the head on a spike over the bridge? To scare everybody. That's what goes on now. There's no real due process in regulatory America. It's like when I spoke in London before COVID, and I forget the woman's name, you might remember it, Kate, but the woman who runs all the regulatory in the UK, and we talked about how the UK, the EU and the UK are considered so over-regulated. But what she said was so true, and I would have never believed this had not gone through this. She goes, but here's what we aren't. We're not mean. American regulators are mean. They play mean, they play dirty. And you need to know the playing field you're on to be able to play it. I'm sorry it doesn't sound lovely. It might offend your political stuff. I don't care. They play mean. So because here we have a government, here we have a cancer detection center under attack, and the indifference was unspeakable. So with Joe, what they're trying to do, and because I've now spent 10 years of my life in this, I know this probably more than most. There was a heart company in Minneapolis, where in the medical world where I come from, where the CEO was put under criminal charges because one of the sales reps in Utah was selling the device off label, and the FDA and the Justice Department was sick and tired of doctors doing whatever they want with products that were not approved for that purpose. because, it's always better to have a bureaucrat practicing medicine than a doctor, but I digress. So they get very frustrated by this, and so they try to put him in jail. And so they did the persecution through process game. The persecution through process game is old. It is not new. And they took, so there goes his name, there goes his reputation, there goes his insurance money, there goes the board of directors. It's going to cost millions of dollars. It's going to be in the media. The media does not run around saying, hey, wonderful things are happening at XYZ company. The media runs around saying, allegedly, all these terrible things are going on. So they drag you through the mud, and luckily the stars align for him. And the guy put a book out, by the way, called Cardiac Arrest. And the DOJ swoops in, just like Joe Sullivan. They arrest him, big press, they put him on trial, and the jury comes back in 1 hour, not guilty, done. And the Justice Department drops that bone and moves on, but they don't stop trying. What the Justice Department wants is they want to get cybersecurity compliance and regulatory power through fear of CISOs and executives. And whether Joe Sullivan is guilty or not, which I don't think he is, it's irrelevant. That's not why they're doing that to him. They're doing that to him because they're in a favorable Ninth Circuit location in Northern California where they think they can get a conviction. And they want that conviction so they can show that to every single executive in the industry to say, you don't play right, you go to jail. Now, of course, that's going to work wonderfully, right? Because all the CISOs are going to sign up to continue being CISOs. But again, I digress. The point is, what's fascinating to me is that half of the tech world doesn't get this. They're sitting going, I guess I'm just naive. There's no shortage of ass kisses and cowards, when you're making six figures. And it's kind of like, well, as long as it's not me, I'll just go along, get along. And that doesn't work. The government banks on cowardice. And if you don't push back, then you will get run over. Ironically, if you push back, they kind of drop the bone really fast because they just want to go on. It's kind of just a numbers game to them. So what's gone? I'm sorry, I've got to see how much time I got going here. Okay, good. Not too bad. Yeah, that's good. Thanks. What I told you was the first half of what happened to LabMD and how we won. And still people thought, oh, well, you really did do something wrong, though, and you got off on a technicality. Okay, fine. And then the whistleblower came back in 2018 and dropped another big bomb. So what happened was this guy was caught in when you do white-collar crime, what I've learned happens is the people that make the mistakes start out thinking they're honest, and they don't go to crime way over here. It's the boss says to this, the boss says to this, the boss says, and over 2 years, you go, whoa, I'm in trouble. And that's what happened to the whistleblower, Rick Wallace here. He did bad stuff. He did bad stuff at the direction of his boss. He couldn't believe he was ever going to potentially get caught. He kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper and more surreal. And then, after my case was over, here's a big shock. His lawyer abandoned him. I know you find that amazing. And so he was upset, and all he wanted to do was fix the damage that was done, and he was very stuck on the fact that his hands were bloody in the destruction of a cancer detection center. So he pulled all his files from his law firm, copied them, and gave them to me and released privilege. Now, there's no way in hell a law firm could get this because that would be considered unethical and against the rules. And if I would have gotten those through like a law firm, it would have been thrown out in court. But the way I got it, it's completely okay. So here's what we learned. Now keep in mind, 2008, 2018, 19. So it takes 10 years of constant fighting, right? So even if the government loses, the next person that comes along who's going to be on the hot seat of a government investigation is going to be told the following. Well, the FTC's crazy. They won't stop. Look at what they did to LabMD, and LabMD was completely vindicated, and they still don't stop. That is a great, powerful tool to settle. So even when the government loses, they win, because they still have their powerful tool. So what we learn is that, lo and behold, this is, now get ready, because this really gets crazy. It turns out that the entire assumption through all of this litigation is that Tyversa was using their software to surveil peer-to-peer networks. Well, it turns out they weren't using their software. It turns out that they were doing child pornography investigations for the FBI, and that they were using their own software initially to find child pornographers. And it wasn't going fast enough. So the FBI came into Tyversa's office, and we have this under sworn deposition testimony in 2019, 11 years later. And they said it was an agent came in and gave EP2P to 4 employees of Tyversa. EP2P has this innocuous, bland title, but what it is, it's peer-to-peer network tool to punch in. Basically, you just break into computers. And it's the access that the government has, and it's so powerful that FBI agents aren't even allowed to possess or know the code. But it's a tool, then take the tool, break into suspected owners' workstations, search their folders, and take what you want if it's incriminating. Why can they do this, and why is it legal? It's legal to go in, the Ninth Circuit had ruled in 2002 that if you go on your workstation, your own computer as the owner, and you say something's publicly available to share, then you've opened it up to the entire world and you've sacrificed your Fourth Amendment protections. So what happened was they said, well, if people have a peer-to-peer folder, they've opened it up, so it's open season for us. So we'll just punch in, we'll rummage through it, great. Fine. Who's not for holding child pornographers accountable? However, Tyversa was given this tool and used it off the clock and broke into thousands of companies. And they went searching for files, and I was one of the unlucky random ones. And they did this to tons of companies, and what they do is they break in, they take the file, they take all the files in the peer-to-peer folder, rummage through. They actually had software to go through this really quickly, take out the valuable ones that they thought they could get money for, change the metadata to make it look like it was taken by a child pornographer, call up the officer, CEO, whoever of the company, say, hey, we found your file out in cyberspace. They did this to Coca-Cola, American Express, Prudential, Goldman Sachs, Howard University, LabMD, and say, LifeLock, I could go on and on. And would you like to hire us? We just want you to know this is out there. If you want to remediate yourself, fine, but we don't let you know. And here's a big shock. They made millions of dollars being paid to fix breaches that never happened. And it was a perfect crime because they're using the FBI software. Even the FBI didn't know this. So now he's getting emboldened and cocky, and we see then puts Wesley Clark on his advisory board, Howard Schmidt on his advisory board. Now these are DC insiders, so doors just open up. That almost means like you're auto-vetted. Any friend of Howard Schmidt's a friend of mine. Fine, boom. And so he gets access to everybody, and he starts getting, and he ends up in front of Congress testifying on this problem. And the FTC is at the hearing. And the FTC is like, what the hell's going on? Who are these companies that are leaking this stuff? We have to get this fixed. So they subpoena Tyversa to turn over these companies that are violating with their terrible data security practices. Tyversa is not going to say, oh, it's all just a made-up ruse. We're doing a shakedown racket making money. They're not going to say that. And because who would? So they just go along, and then suddenly I show up. And the only reason I showed up was I was the only one that owned a medical company. If I owned TJ Maxx or American Express or any of those things, I could have settled with the government and my company wouldn't have been dead. But in this instance, if you settle, you die. So I discovered through this push that what was going on was this racket was going on under the guise of the government. The government didn't, the FBI didn't know, but and here's the big crazy stuff. In the records, when the FTC got the data from Tyversa, they looked at it and went, wait a minute. This metadata doesn't show that this was found loose on a peer-to-peer network. This metadata shows you took it directly from the owners. Now, in a naive world, when you think that the law is what they show on television shows, you would think at that moment the Federal Trade Commission would call in the Justice Department and the FBI and they'd erase Tyversa. But that's not what happened. The investigators of the FTC were under immense pressure to get control of this. And so they blinked and they told Tyversa, change these metadatas, get rid of the evidence that they show that these originate computers, because U.S. companies cannot show this. Because if a U.S. company has this evidence, then we can't investigate them because they've got a Fourth Amendment protection of privacy. So the government knew they had no reason to investigate 100 companies. And so they altered the data so they could have the plausible reason to investigate a company. It is really, really, really easy for government to investigate you for any reason. It is a really low bar. And they had no bar at all, so they had to create this. Now, what are the odds of anyone ever finding this out? Are you kidding me? You'd have to run into a crazy person like me, who then would write a book, who then would have a whistleblower come out, who then would sit there and go through this, who then would go through House oversight, then would get witness tampered with back into submission, then would come back 4 years later and go, I'm sick of this, here's this. So the big picture on this, even though that's an awful story and that's terrible, but the big picture is, where's the accountability? Is everyone at the Federal Trade Commission a cheater? No. Is everyone at the Federal Trade Commission an enabler of people not being held accountable? You bet. Do most judges want to protect the government? Oh yeah. Is the media running to tell a story about how a corporation got attacked unethically by a rogue regulator? Really, show me one story. So when your number comes up and you lose the lottery and your name is LabMD or Joe Sullivan, you have to understand that we're at this Kafkaesque world right now that is rapidly going to create anarchy if we don't demand that this type of enforcement stop. Because in the final analysis, cybersecurity is not better than it was 10 years ago. Lawyers that are running this thing have no cybersecurity experience. They've just got a lot of government power. There's a ton of money being spent by companies to get this done, to keep them at bay. And yet, there was that moment when we're in front of the 11th Circuit, and the FTC lawyers up there, and the judges are on fire. Now, I'll tell you, the fact that the judges were on fire against the government, I was told, was unheard of. Like, I won the judge lottery. There could have been another 3 judges from that same panel that no way would they go after the government like this. But I happened to win the lottery. And Judge Choflat was the lead judge, 88 years old, appointed by Gerald Ford, has no delusions that he'll be on the Supreme Court, doesn't care who he offends, isn't even on senior status, doesn't listen to his law clerks, reads everything on his own, and has had it with this. That was the lucky break for me, because that was about the only judge that would almost yell at the FTC for what's going on and telling them They're participating in shakedowns. Your case blew up. You're working with bad people. What is going on? When I say that, it's dramatic, whatever. When an Article 3 judge says it, other judges pay attention. And that, sadly, is a lottery win. That's not the usual thing. In the last 50 years, legally, judges are required to give the government vast deference, which means the jump the shark benefit of the doubt. So that to defeat the government, you have to come with the crazy stuff I now have, like files, forensic evidence, data. You don't have that, and most people don't. I mean, everyone just runs away. Doubt kills. And how this affects everyone is that we're spending billions of dollars, and there's careers that are now being threatened. And now, I mean, God loves CISOs, but I spent the last 4 years kind of yelling at them, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. and I was kind of felt like I was wasting my time, because really, who the hell am I? Some medical guy from Atlanta. I mean, I'm not in the tech world. They don't know who the hell I am. And I'm just trying to ring the bell. And I was shocked how many people just want me to shut the hell up. I have to say, I was stunned by how many people just want me to shut up. But now you see, oops, it's coming to your front porch. If you're a CISO, if you're a company executive, if you're involved in cybersecurity, you can go to jail. Now, is cybersecurity perfect? Is everyone in control of it? Is it just A, B, C, D, E? So my message is, we have a regulatory regime that is focused on power but not knowledge, and while that might seem an insurmountable problem, now everyone, I think, should see that they have an intelligent self-interest in making sure that this doesn't continue, and to understand exactly, regardless of what Joe Sullivan's verdict is, and I'll be surprised if ultimately anything happens to him through the appellate process, but that the battle isn't really in the trial or even the verdict. They just want to drain you dry and rip you to shreds. So even if Joe wins or LabMD wins, the next group will be much more likely to roll over. Yeah, go ahead, Kate. Yeah. Okay, so Kate asked how I feel about the last legislation. So being a student of the Federal Trade Commission and the ebbs and flows of who has the power of Congress, there's Democrats, Republicans, and bureaucrats. And it's a uniparty. And the bureaucrats watch the Democrats come in and out, the Republicans come in and out, and when the Democrats are in power, they go to get as much power as they can, because they know the tide's going to go back out the other way soon. So it's like, we want our 3 steps forward, because then we're going to have 2 steps back. And when our 3 steps forward, we go 2 steps back. And if it's codified in the law, it is almost impossible for a judge to get rid of it. So I think it's dangerous. There's nothing that can be done about it. This is what's interesting. I spend so much time on the Hill, and when I want I'm at the point with the entire political process, I'm like, y'all can just go pound sand. This is just theater. It's terrifying. I'm out of here. So, of course, that's when my phone rings. And so everyone expects the House to turn red in November, and Kathleen McMorris Rogers is supposed to be the new chairman of Energy and Commerce, and so her office called me, and she met with me from there, to talk about this, because it's not about regulatory, it's not about process. It's about party, it's about due process. These guys want power to just go pull you out and make you do something, period, without you being able to go through due process. And the game they play is that, well, we're here to save the world, we're here to do the right thing. It's victim, villain, savior. We are the savior, we are the government, we are the savior. You, American, are the victim. And that big bad company, they're the villain. And they have to have that triangle of complete bullshit to be able to pull this off. And what they've put in the FTC right now are just, how how do I say this nicely? I don't know how to say it nicely. But they're zealots. And you get to become a zealot when you're born into this sort of vacuum of no real experience. When you come from academia to law school and you've never been in cybersecurity, you've never been in business, you've never set anything up on your own, you're just save the world, and these people have real power now. So it's the same people that want 87,000 IRS agents. And it never ends well, because it's not about, they want to tell you it's about getting the bad guy. It's about stripping due process away and centralizing power. And here's the bottom line. Does anyone here think that's going to help make cybersecurity better? It's so far away from the problem. It's not a technologically, it's like, you know, who wants to go see their congressman when they're sick? It's the same thing. It's the government's trying to practice technology with people that have no technology expertise, but they have a job, and they want names on the bench, and they've got a job to protect. So I'm sorry about my all inspirational talk. You're probably all happy. But are there any other questions about that? Anyone? So where, I'll tie this up. Well, how much time is it? Oh, okay. So, I mean, basically I've learned this battle never ends. And, you know, my company's gone. I have opened a couple other medical places and moved to Virginia. Joe Sullivan, you know, I'm very concerned about having the right type of lawyers, and I'm very keenly interested in what his defense lawyers do for him, and how you have got to come out swinging really hard against the government. And most lawyers are not swingers like that, especially when it's against the government, because they know when this trial's over, they're still with these judges and people. So it's really hard to find someone that's really going to play aggressive. And you have, you know, the media putting all the bad things that were said when the justice department was putting up their thing, and you don't see that same type of questioning on the other side. This is just the way it is. I mean, everything's clickbait now. We're not discerning. We have a Twitter attention span, and it's clickbait. And until we understand how we're creating our own jailers that way, I think it's going to continue. And the CISO community right now is the latest group that needs to understand this isn't going to end well for you. And still, the rest of the executive world is not going to care. And the legal community is going to make money. And the privacy groups and trade associations don't care. And why should any other citizen really care, right? So if you don't care about the stripping of due process with any legal group, you have to understand how that's so interrelated. So, you know, I hope and pray that guy does okay. I actually think he probably got off. Juries are pretty amazing. And you know, if you hang within the judicial system long enough, if you have that much money, usually things will work out, but it's not a snap. It takes years. And then we've now got all this evidence, but it's 2008 this started. And, you know, my company closed in 2014, and we didn't learn this till 2019, and I didn't have an income stream or money anymore, and you know, I don't get pro bono defense like I did. So I have a lot of plaintiff cases against the government, but we'll see if anything ever comes of it. That's really not the picture I think that's important to the public and the cybersecurity world. It's really our regulatory apparatus is unfortunately a cluster. I wish I could, let me think about something inspirational to say as I step off stage. I don't have anything. But it's an unfortunate playing field that I think just has to be heard. And I think, like the guy that wrote the Madoff book, no one listened until they all lost their millions of dollars, and by that was too late, and the government didn't help them get most of it back. And that's sort of the same thing I think we are in cybersecurity and regulatory. We really have to, it's kind of late in the hour before they start throwing people in jail. Thank you very much. I'm around for that. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay, I love that question.
We need standardization. Rather than leaving the agencies to make the rules as they go, we need something.
You're right. You're right.
Reducing standards.
Until the public understands, okay, so let me tell you really quickly, I hope really quickly how this happened. Congress doesn't want to touch this. Congressmen are political. They don't want to touch cybersecurity. It's a lose-lose situation. So when you get, here's what happens to brand new Congress people. God bless America, go, 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 go. And then you have 1 or 2 terms and like, there's only one of me and there's 400 of them and I can't get anywhere. So I'm either going to become them or I'm out of here. And so that's the sad truth, because Congress was built to be ineffective anyway. The Founding Fathers made Congress to be a mess, so we didn't get too many laws. And then came Woodrow Wilson. My opinion, the worst president in the history of the country, because he started the administrative state. This started in 1914. And here's the spin. We have to have experts in the Industrial Revolution and the Medical Revolution. Congress doesn't have medical knowledge or industrial knowledge, and so we have to be able to create that. So we create these agencies. Congress loves these agencies because they get to, okay, got it, thanks. So they get it. Congress loves the agencies because they get a pass. They get to see you in your meetings and go, I know, it's terrible. That is just awful. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. And my people will be in touch with you so you can make a $250 to $3,000 donation. Have a great day. And that's basically the game, right? And so it's all talk, 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 but they don't want to touch it. And we have, what the public doesn't understand is that 100 years later, the underground government of agencies is at least 300 organizations that we don't elect, have unbelievable power, have deference so judges' hands are tied. Until that is curtailed, and there's actually a Supreme Court order coming in soon. There's some hearing on this case, Axon versus the FTC, that's right on money about this. Nothing will change. But here's what's different. Here's what's hopeful. Unlike 20 years ago or 10 years ago, even Scalia, even conservative judges, they thought the administrative state was great. But there have been now so many horror stories that they now understand it needs to be curtailed. That's going to be it. Sadly, well-intentioned Congress people have no power. Okay? All right, so I think that's it. Any other quick questions? But thank you very much.